The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by any known species. It floated in the empty space between three star systems, a monument to cooperation and peace. Representatives from 47 different civilizations gathered there to discuss matters of trade, territory, and the future of the galaxy itself. Ambassador Daniel Cooper stood at the center of the speaking platform, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon him. Some of those eyes were actual eyes. Others were sensory organs that worked in ways humans could not understand. But all of them were focused on him, waiting for his next words. The humans had joined the Galactic Council only 3 cycles ago. In that short time, they had remained quiet and observant, rarely speaking in the grand assemblies, always polite but distant. The elder races found them curious, but ultimately unremarkable. They were just another young species finding their place among the stars. Today, that perception was about to change. High Arbiter Velthanax towered over the assembly from his central position. His body was made of living crystal that caught the light and scattered it into rainbow patterns. He had served as Arbiter for 300 human years, guiding the Council through countless disputes with patience and wisdom. Ambassador Cooper, Velthanax said, his voice resonating through the translation systems that allowed all species to understand each other. The Council has received your species' formal request to abstain from the upcoming joint military exercises. This is highly unusual. We require an explanation. Daniel took a deep breath. He had practiced this moment many times. But the reality of standing before the galaxy's most powerful beings still made his heart race. Honored representatives, he began, keeping his voice steady. Humanity respectfully declines participation in the joint fleet maneuvers. We must be completely honest with this assembly. He paused, letting the silence build. The translation systems hummed softly as they prepared to carry his words to every corner of the vast hall. Humans fear war. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Laughter erupted from the Krethian delegation, a harsh clicking sound that their insectoid bodies produced when amused. The Vorn ambassador, a serpentine creature covered in iridescent scales, made a gesture of contempt that needed no translation. Even the usually emotionless Meridian observers exchanged glances of surprise. Delegate Cyrax of the hegemony uncoiled her long body and rose to speak. She was considered one of the most cunning politicians in the Council, and her species had built an empire spanning dozens of star systems. Fear, she repeated, her forked tongue flickering with amusement. The species that colonized 3 star systems in a single generation fears conflict? The species that tamed their savage homeworld fears a simple military exercise? Daniel nodded, his face showing nothing but sincerity. We have seen what war does to a people. We have felt its consequences in ways that shaped our entire civilization. We are not proud of this fear, but we cannot deny it. Humanity formally requests to be considered a non-combatant species under Council protection. The hall exploded into chaos. Dozens of delegates began speaking at once, their voices overlapping in a storm of confusion and disbelief. No species in the history of the Council had ever voluntarily declared itself weak. It was unthinkable. It was absurd. Warlord Krethax, of the Krethian Dominion, rose from his seat, his armored exoskeleton gleaming under the lights. His people were warriors, bred for combat over thousands of generations. They respected strength above all else, and weakness disgusted them. This is a trick, he declared, his voice cutting through the noise. No species survives the journey to the stars without the will to fight. The humans are playing some game we do not understand. Daniel shook his head slowly. There is no trick, Warlord. We are simply being honest about our nature. Humanity has worked hard to overcome our violent past. We do not wish to slide backward into old habits. The Krethian made a sound of disgust and sat down, already composing messages to his military commanders. If the humans were truly as weak as they claimed, their colonies would make easy additions to the Dominion. From the observation deck, above the main floor, Commander Lisa Warren watched the proceedings with a tight jaw. She wore the uniform of the Earth Defense Fleet, though officially she was listed as a diplomatic aide. Her true purpose was to assess the military capabilities of the Council species and report back to Earth's command. Beside her stood Captain Greg Morrison, a veteran of the patrol fleets that guarded humanity's outer colonies. His gray hair and weathered face spoke of decades spent in the cold emptiness of space, watching for threats that never came. "They're laughing at us," Lisa muttered, her hands gripping the railing. "Every single one of them thinks we're fools or cowards." Greg placed a calming hand on her shoulder. "That's the point. The ambassador knows exactly what he's doing. Let them underestimate us. It's safer that way," Lisa wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. The Council species had developed spaceflight through slow, careful cooperation. They had expanded peacefully, forming alliances and trade agreements rather than conquering their neighbors. Their conflicts were limited affairs, settled through negotiation or small scale skirmishes that rarely resulted in significant casualties. They had never experienced total war. They had never built weapons designed to kill millions in a single flash. They had never looked upon the ruins of their own cities and wondered if their species would survive to see another sunrise. Humans had done all of these things, and worse. In the days that followed, news of humanity's admission spread across the galaxy. It traveled through communication networks at faster than light speeds, reaching the farthest colonies and outposts within hours. Everywhere, the reaction was the same: laughter, contempt, pity. The Krethian Dominion began repositioning its battle fleets, moving them closer to the borders of human space. Their scouts probed the edges of human territory, mapping patrol routes and defensive positions. They found only a handful of outdated vessels and lightly armed stations. The Vorn Syndicate sent their own reconnaissance forces to assess human colonies. They reported back that the humans had minimal orbital defenses and no apparent heavy weapons. The colonists seemed more interested in farming and research than military preparation. Even species that had no hostile intentions toward humanity began to view them differently. Trade negotiations became more aggressive, with alien merchants demanding better terms. Diplomatic requests that would have been granted automatically now required extensive justification. Earth had painted a target on itself, and every predator in the galaxy was taking notice. On New Boston, the largest human colony outside the solar system, Governor Samuel Price read the reports with growing concern. His colony was home to 3 million people, families who had left Earth seeking new opportunities among the stars. Now they found themselves on the front lines of a conflict they did not understand. "The Krethians are testing our response times," his security chief reported. "They send probes into our outer system. We chase them away. They come back the next day. Each time they get a little bolder." Samuel stared out his window at the green fields that stretched to the horizon. His grandfather had been among the first settlers, carving a new home from an alien world through sheer determination and hard work. Now, everything they had built stood in danger. "Have you contacted Earth Command?" he asked. The security chief nodded. "They say to remain calm and continue normal operations. They say everything is under control." Samuel wanted to believe that. He truly did. But when he looked up at the stars that night, he could not shake the feeling that something terrible was coming, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. In a complex that did not appear on any public map, Admiral Patricia Dunn convened an emergency meeting of the United Defense Council. The room was carved from solid granite, shielded against every form of surveillance known to human or alien science. Only 12 people in the entire government knew this place existed. Around the long table sat the most powerful military leaders on Earth: generals, admirals, intelligence directors, and strategic planners. All of them watching the holographic displays that floated above the table's surface. The displays showed the movement of alien fleets throughout human space, each one edging closer to territories that humanity had claimed as its own. "The Krethians have moved 3 full battle groups too, within striking distance of our outer colonies," reported General Kevin Shaw. He was a stocky man, with silver hair and eyes that had seen too many classified briefings. "Their main force is positioned near the Tau Ceti transit point. If they decide to attack, they could reach New Boston in less than 6 hours." Admiral Dunn studied the tactical display without expression. She had commanded Earth's hidden defenses for 15 years, and in all that time, she had never faced a genuine threat. Now that threat was materializing before her eyes. "What about the Vorn?" she asked. "Reconnaissance probes near Alpha Centauri. They're mapping our patrol routes and cataloging our visible assets. Current estimate is that they believe we have approximately 40 combat-capable vessels." The Admiral allowed herself a thin smile. "And the actual number?" General Shaw pulled up another display, this one marked with the highest security classification. 412 warships in active service, with another 200 in reserve, plus the orbital defense platforms, the automated interceptor networks, and the strategic weapons systems. Dr. Maria Santos sat at the far end of the table, the only civilian present. She served as the Council's chief historian and cultural advisor, and her expertise had proven invaluable in understanding alien psychology. Now she would help explain human psychology to beings who thought they understood it. "This is exactly what Ambassador Cooper predicted," she said, her voice calm and measured. "The Council species have never encountered a civilization like ours. They assume that all spacefaring races developed the same way they did, through peaceful cooperation and gradual expansion. They cannot imagine a species that reached the stars through conflict and struggle." Admiral Dunn nodded slowly. "Then perhaps it's time we helped them imagine it." The history of human warfare was not a secret. Anyone with access to Earth's public archives could read about the battles and conflicts that had shaped humanity's development. But reading about war and understanding it were two very different things. The alien races had glanced at human history and dismissed it as primitive savagery. The growing pains of a young species that had not yet learned better ways, they did not understand that those growing pains had forged humanity into something far more dangerous than they could comprehend. Dr. Santos began preparing the transmission that would be sent to the Galactic Council. It started with the ancient wars, the conquests of empires that had risen and fallen long before humans learned to split the atom. Footage of soldiers marching in endless columns, millions of individuals organized for a single terrible purpose. Then came the First World War trenches, stretching across entire continents, filled with men who lived in mud and died in agony. Chemical weapons that dissolved lungs and melted flesh. Artillery barrages that continued for days without pause, transforming beautiful landscapes into cratered wastelands where nothing could survive. The Second World War followed. Cities burned from the air, their populations incinerated in firestorms that created their own weather. Concentration camps where millions were murdered with industrial efficiency. And finally, the weapons that changed everything. The atomic bombs that fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, showing humanity exactly what it was capable of destroying. But the transmission did not stop there. It continued through the Cold War, when humanity built enough nuclear weapons to destroy itself many times over. It showed the smaller conflicts that erupted around the globe, each one adding new innovations to the art of killing. Napalm, cluster munitions, biological agents designed in laboratories. Then came the resource conflicts of the 22nd century, when climate change and population pressure pushed civilization to the breaking point. Orbital strikes turned cities into craters. Engineered plagues swept across continents. The human population dropped from 12 billion to 4 billion in less than a decade, and still humanity had fought. Still, they had developed new weapons, new tactics, new ways to inflict death upon each other. They had crawled back from the edge of extinction and kept building, kept preparing, kept remembering. Commander Lisa Warren reviewed the transmission from her station in the underground complex. She had seen all of this material before during her military training, but watching it compiled into a single package still made her stomach turn. "Do you think they'll understand?" she asked. Dr. Santos shook her head sadly. "Understanding will come later, if it comes at all. First, there will be disbelief. They will think we have fabricated the footage or exaggerated the casualty figures. The concept of species-wide conflict is simply outside their experience." Admiral Dunn authorized the transmission with a single gesture. Across the vast distances of space, the compressed data package began its journey toward the Council station. But the transmission contained more than history. It also included technical specifications for weapons that humanity had developed after joining the Council. The elder races had assumed that humans possessed only the primitive vessels they showed publicly. They were about to learn otherwise, in hidden facilities throughout human space. The real military assets continued their silent watch. Defense platforms disguised as mining stations. Automated weapons systems buried beneath the surfaces of moons and asteroids. Ships capable of accelerating to relativistic speeds, transforming themselves into projectiles that could crack a planet's crust. And in the deepest vaults of all, weapons that humanity hoped it would never need to use. Weapons that could sterilize entire star systems if deployed correctly. Weapons that existed only because humans understood that some threats required absolute responses. General Shaw watched the transmission confirmation appear on his display. The Council should receive this within the hour. What do you expect their reaction to be? Admiral Dunn leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. Confusion at first, then fear, and then, if we are lucky, wisdom. And if we are not lucky. The Admiral opened her eyes and stared at the tactical display, where dozens of alien warships continued their slow encroachment into human space. Then we will show them that everything in that transmission was just the beginning. We have spent 3 centuries preparing for the day when we might need to defend ourselves against the galaxy. I pray that day never comes. She paused, and her voice grew cold. But if it does, we will be ready. High Arbiter, Velthanax, received the human transmission in his private chambers aboard the Council station. The room was designed to accommodate his crystalline biology, filled with carefully positioned light sources that kept his body energized and healthy. He had spent centuries in this space, reviewing documents and making decisions that affected trillions of lives. Protocol required that any formal communication from a member species be reviewed by the full Council before the Arbiter examined it personally. But something about this transmission made Velthanax curious. He had watched the human ambassador admit his species' fear of war, and he had sensed something beneath those words. Something hidden. He opened the transmission alone. The first images showed primitive human soldiers marching in vast formations. Velthanax had seen military parades before, displays of strength meant to impress allies and intimidate enemies. But this was different. The sheer scale of it was remarkable. Millions of individuals organized and equipped for a single purpose. And the purpose, he quickly realized, was death. The footage shifted to show landscapes scarred by conflict. Trenches carved into the earth, stretching further than the eye could see. Soldiers huddled in mud and filth, waiting for orders to charge across open ground into the teeth of enemy weapons. And when those charges came, the cameras recorded what happened. Bodies piled upon bodies. Entire generations cut down in minutes. Velthanax's crystalline structure flickered with unease. His species resolved disputes through negotiation and careful diplomacy. The concept of sending thousands of individuals to die for a strip of contested territory was almost incomprehensible to him. But the transmission continued, and what came next was worse. He watched cities burn from above, struck by explosive devices dropped from primitive aircraft. He watched beaches turn red with blood as soldiers stormed defended positions. He watched something called the Holocaust, and for the first time in his long life, he felt genuine horror. Then came the atomic weapons. The footage showed a single bomb falling from a single aircraft. For a moment, nothing happened. Then light, brighter than any sun, erased an entire city from existence. The explosion rose into the sky in a shape that would become synonymous with human destructive capacity. A mushroom cloud that marked the dawn of a new age, and the humans had used this weapon on their own species. They had killed hundreds of thousands of their own kind in an instant, and they had done it twice. Velthanax stopped the playback and sat motionless for a long moment. His crystalline body hummed with processing as he struggled to integrate what he had witnessed. The Council species had theoretical knowledge of nuclear weapons. Some had even developed crude versions in their distant past. But none had ever deployed them against populated areas. None had ever needed to. He resumed the transmission. and the horrors continued to mount. Weapons that could poison the air, the water, the very genetic material of living beings. Missiles that could cross a planet in minutes, carrying enough destructive power to eliminate millions in a single flash. And the humans had built thousands of these missiles, pointing them at each other for decades, each side knowing that the slightest miscalculation could end their entire species. The resource conflicts of the 22nd century were the worst of all. By then, humanity had developed weapons that made nuclear bombs seem quaint. Orbital bombardment platforms that could reduce cities to molten glass. Engineered plagues designed to target specific genetic markers. Kinetic impactors that struck with the force. Small asteroids. The human population had dropped from 12 billion to 4 billion. They had nearly destroyed themselves completely. And yet they had survived. They had rebuilt. They had continued. The final portion of the transmission was not historical. It was a technical readout of humanity's current defensive capabilities, the ones they had hidden from Council surveys. Velthanix Re. D. The specifications with growing alarm. Weapons platforms orbiting every human colony. Automated defense systems that could engage thousands of targets simultaneously. Ships designed for a single purpose, to kill as many enemies as possible before being destroyed themselves. And there were hints of worse things. Weapons whose specifications were not included in the transmission, described only as strategic assets reserved for existential threats. The humans had not revealed everything. They had simply shown enough to make a point. Velthanax summoned his aides and demanded an emergency session of the full council. The great hall filled within the hour. Word had spread that something significant was happening, and every delegate wanted to witness it personally. They gathered in their designated positions, chattering among themselves about rumors and speculation. Then the lights dimmed, and the transmission began to play on the central display. The reactions varied by species. The Krethians watched in silence, their military minds analyzing the tactics and technology on display. The Vorn hissed with discomfort as casualties mounted beyond anything in their historical experience. The Meridians, supposedly emotionless, showed subtle signs of distress as the scope of human violence became clear. Delegate Cyrax, who had laughed at humanity's admission of fear, watched footage of nuclear weapons being deployed. Her translation matrix struggled to convey the scale of destruction in terms her mind could process. When the mushroom clouds rose above Japanese cities, she turned away from the display. This was a conflict between factions of the same species, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ambassador Daniel Cooper stood at the speaking platform, his expression somber. The Second World War resulted in approximately 70 million deaths over 6 years. Our species continued to develop more efficient weapons afterward. By the time of our third global conflict, we had the capability to render our homeworld uninhabitable several times over. And yet you survived, Velthanax observed. Struggling to keep his voice steady, Daniel nodded slowly. Barely. We pulled ourselves back from the brink each time, but the knowledge remains. Every human alive understands what we are capable of. We carry the memories of our ancestors in our culture, our stories, our very identity. This is why we fear war, not because we cannot fight, but because we know that once we truly commit to conflict, we do not stop until the enemy is annihilated or we are destroyed in the attempt. Warlord Krethax shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His battle groups were still positioned near human space, waiting for orders that suddenly seemed much more dangerous. The Meridian observer, silent throughout the assembly, spoke for the first time. His species was known for their advanced technology and cold logic, and they rarely participated in council debates. But now his smooth voice cut through the stunned silence. The weapons you have shown us are outdated by 3 centuries of human development. What have you created since? Daniel exchanged a glance with someone off-screen. A new display appeared, showing technical specifications that made several delegates physically recoil. We hoped we would never need to show you these, the ambassador said quietly. We hoped that peace would last forever, and these tools would rust in their storage facilities. But you wanted the truth, and the truth is this. Humanity has never stopped preparing for war. We simply stopped talking about it. The The council session continued for 7 more hours, but the damage was done. The galaxy's perception of humanity had shifted forever. The leadership of the Krethian Dominion gathered in their war chamber, a vast space carved from the heart of their homeworld's largest moon. For 10,000 years, this room had witnessed the planning of conquests that had built an empire spanning 30 star systems. The walls were decorated with the preserved remains of defeated enemies, trophies from campaigns that had crushed all who dared resist. Krethian might. Warlord Krethax stood before the strategic display, watching the human transmission for the 4th time. Around him, his generals and admirals waited in respectful silence. They had all seen the footage now. They had all read the technical specifications, and they were all trying to decide what it meant. Could be fabricated, Admiral Crixenal suggested, his mandibles clicking with uncertainty. The humans may be trying to frighten us with false imagery. Krethax made a gesture of dismissal. Our intelligence services have verified every detail. The historical records match what we already knew of human development. The weapon specifications are consistent with known physics. The humans have not lied to us. They have simply revealed a truth we were too foolish to see, and we should withdraw our fleets, another general said. If the humans are as dangerous as they claim, attacking them would be suicide. The war chamber erupted into angry clicking and hissing. The Krethian military did not retreat. They did not show weakness. For 10,000 years they had conquered all who opposed them, and no transmission from a young species was going to change that. Krethax raised one armored limb. The humans have shown us their history and their weapons, but they have not shown us their will. They claim to fear war. Perhaps that fear has made them soft. Perhaps they have forgotten how to fight while they built their pretty colonies and conducted their peaceful research. He turned to face his commanders, his compound eyes gleaming with ancient warrior instincts. There is only one way to know for certain. We will test them. We will send our fleets to their colony world and demand their surrender. If they submit, we will know that their fear has weakened them beyond recovery. And if they fight, we will learn exactly how dangerous they truly are. The decision was made within the hour. 27 Krethian warships, the largest force deployed beyond Dominion borders in 300 years, began their journey toward the human colony of New Boston. Admiral Patricia Dunn received word of the Krethian movement from her command center beneath the Rocky Mountains. She had expected this response. The Krethians were warriors who respected only strength, and strength, in their understanding, meant the willingness to use force. Humanity's admission of fear had been interpreted as an invitation to attack. Now they would learn their mistake. Broadcast the following on all frequencies, she ordered. Krethian forces are advised to halt their advance immediately. Continued approach will be interpreted as hostile action and will be met with appropriate response. This is your only warning. The message went out at faster than light speeds, reaching the Krethian fleet within minutes. Their response was equally swift. Human forces, this is Warlord Krethax of the Krethian Dominion. Your colonies exist at our pleasure. You will surrender your settlements and submit to Dominion authority, or you will be destroyed. You have until we reach your orbit to decide. Admiral Dunn showed no emotion as she listened to the ultimatum. She had known this moment would come eventually. Humanity could not hide forever, and sooner or later, some aggressive species would call their bluff. Except it was not a bluff. Begin Contingency Protocol 7, she ordered. Throughout the New Boston system, dormant systems came online. Defense platforms that had spent years disguised as mining installations powered up their weapons, revealing batteries of missiles and energy projectors that the Krethians had never detected. Automated interceptor swarms launched from hidden bays within the asteroid field. Thousands of small craft programmed to seek and destroy enemy vessels. Sensor systems activated, tracking every Krethian ship with precision that would have seemed impossible moments before, and in orbit around New Boston itself. The colonists watched as something remarkable happened. A shimmer passed across the sky, and suddenly a barrier of energy surrounded their world. The planetary shield, a technology that the Council believed humanity did not possess, had activated for the first time in its existence. Governor Samuel Price stood in his command center. watching the tactical display with a mixture of awe and terror. He had known that Earth had hidden defenses throughout the colony, but he had never imagined anything like this. The peaceful mining stations and research facilities that surrounded his world had transformed into weapons, platforms capable of annihilating entire fleets. The Krethian fleet arrived expecting to face two outdated patrol vessels and a defenseless colony. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by a defensive network that could engage them from every direction simultaneously. Their sensors screamed warnings as targeting systems locked onto their ships, and their tactical computers calculated survival odds that approached zero. "This is Warlord Krethax to human forces," the Krethian commander transmitted, his voice carrying an edge of uncertainty for the first time. "Stand down your weapons immediately or we will open fire." Admiral Dunn's response was broadcast not just to the Krethian fleet, but to every ship and station within transmission range. She wanted the entire galaxy to hear what came next. "Krethian forces, you have entered sovereign human space in a hostile formation. You have ignored our explicit warning to halt your advance. Our weapons are now locked on your vessels, and our defensive systems are fully activated. You have 1 minute to reverse course and withdraw from this system. If you have not begun withdrawal within that time, we will consider it confirmation of hostile intent and respond accordingly." The countdown began. Commander Lisa Warren watched her displays from the command station aboard the orbital defense platform. Every Krethian ship was highlighted in red, with firing solutions calculated and weapons ready. If the Admiral gave the order, 27 alien warships would cease to exist in a matter of seconds. But the order never came. At 43 seconds, first Krethian ship began to turn, then another and another. One by one, the mighty warships of the Dominion powered down their weapons and oriented toward the system's edge. Within 2 minutes, the entire fleet was in full retreat, accelerating away from New Boston as fast as their engines could carry them. No shots had been fired. No lives had been lost. The Krethians had looked into the face of human defensive capability and decided that conquest was not worth the cost. Admiral Dunn allowed herself a small nod of satisfaction. "Transmit the engagement data to the Galactic Council. Let them see what the defenses of one colony look like. Let them imagine what Earth itself can bring to bear." The data package included sensor readings, weapons specifications, and tactical analysis. It showed that humanity had not merely been hiding their capabilities from the Council. They had been quietly fortifying every settlement, every station, every ship with redundant defensive systems that exceeded anything the Elder races possessed, and the weapons they had revealed, according to human sources, were merely the ones they were comfortable showing. The true strategic assets remained hidden, reserved for threats that warranted their deployment. Ambassador. Daniel Cooper addressed the Council once more as the implications sank in. "You asked us why we fear war? Now you understand. We fear it because we have refined violence into an art form over thousands of years of practice. We fear it because we know that if we are pushed far enough, we will not fight to win. We will fight to exterminate. And we know from our own history that we are capable of exactly that." He paused, letting his words echo through the great hall. "The Krethians tested our resolve and found it genuine. We do not want war. We truly fear its consequences. But we will never be defenseless again. Humanity learned long ago that peace requires the ability to defend it. We have paid for that lesson with rivers of blood. We will not forget it." In the weeks following the New Boston incident, the Galactic Council underwent a fundamental transformation. The Krethian Dominion, humiliated by their retreat, issued a formal apology for their aggressive posturing. The Vorn Syndicate recalled every scout and reconnaissance probe from human space. Even the arrogant hegemony, which had considered humanity beneath their notice, began treating human diplomats with careful respect. The laughter had stopped. The contempt had vanished. In their place was something new. Something that most alien species had never felt toward the young species from Earth. It was fear. High Arbiter Velthanax requested a private meeting with Ambassador Daniel Cooper, away from the formal settings of council assemblies. They met in the crystalline gardens that Veltanax had cultivated over centuries. A peaceful space filled with plants and minerals from dozens of worlds. Artificial sunlight scattered through the Arbiter's crystalline body, casting rainbow patterns across the flowering shrubs. "I have served as Arbiter for 300 of your years," Veltanax said slowly, choosing his words with care. "In all that time I have encountered many species with many different approaches to the challenges of civilization. Warriors and pacifists, builders and destroyers, philosophers and pragmatists, but I have never encountered a species quite like yours." Daniel sat on a bench carved from meteoric iron, a diplomatic gift from the Meridian worlds. "We are not so different from others," he said. "We simply had a harder path to reach the stars." Veltanax moved closer, his crystalline form catching the light. "Most civilizations boast of their military prowess. They display their weapons openly and threaten their enemies with destruction. You did the opposite. You hid your strength and declared your weakness. Most species demand respect through intimidation. You seemed willing to accept mockery and contempt. I find myself struggling to understand your psychology." Daniel considered the question for a long moment before responding. "Perhaps I can explain it with a story from my own family. When I was young, my grandfather told me stories about his grandfather's war. For generations separated us from that conflict, but the memories still carried weight. He spoke of friends who never came home, of cities reduced to rubble, of choices that haunted survivors until their dying days." He paused, looking out at the alien plants that surrounded them. "Every human family has similar stories. We remember our dead. We remember what we did to create them. War is not an abstract concept for us. It is a lived experience, passed down through generations in stories and songs and monuments to the fallen." "And so, you choose restraint," Veltanax observed. Daniel shook his head. "We choose caution. There is a difference. Restraint implies that we are holding back impulses that we would otherwise act upon. Caution means that we understand the consequences of those impulses and work to prevent them from manifesting." He leaned forward, his voice becoming more intense. "We learned, through terrible experience, that the capacity for violence must be controlled. Not suppressed, not denied, but directed carefully and deliberately. We built systems to prevent our worst impulses from destroying us. Democratic governments that require consensus before waging war, international laws that criminalize atrocities, defensive alliances that make aggression too costly to contemplate. These were crude tools, perhaps, but they worked. Humanity survived to reach the stars because we learned to control ourselves." Velthanax's form pulsed with thoughtful light. "The Council has protected peace through a similar philosophy. We believed that sufficient military power, distributed among many species, would deter aggression by making it too costly. For most species, that may be true," Daniel agreed. "But strength alone does not guarantee restraint. Power must be paired with the wisdom to not use it. Humanity has the power. We are still working on the wisdom." The ambassador stood and walked to the edge of the garden, where a viewport looked out over the vast expanse of the Council station. Ships from dozens of species came and went, representing the largest cooperative effort in galactic history. Billions of beings worked together in peace, building something greater than any single civilization could achieve alone. "We asked to be considered non-combatants, not because we cannot fight," Daniel continued, "but because we hope to never have to. Every weapon we build is a failure of diplomacy. Every soldier we train represents a future we did not want. But we build them anyway, because we understand that peace requires the ability to defend it." Months passed, and humanity's relationship with the Galactic Council continued to evolve. They remained officially non-combatant, status that had seemed laughable before the New Boston incident, but now carried a very different meaning. The galaxy understood that humans were not refusing to fight because they were weak. They were refusing because they knew exactly what would happen if they started. Admiral Patricia Dunn retired from active military service and accepted a position as Earth's representative to the Council's newly formed Peace Preservation Committee. Her expertise in defensive strategy proved invaluable in helping. Other species protect themselves without resorting to aggressive posturing. Dr. Maria Santos published a comprehensive history of human conflict that became required reading for council diplomats. Understanding human psychology, she argued, was essential for maintaining peaceful relations with a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of war. Commander Lisa Warren received a promotion to captain and took command of a new patrol vessel assigned to the outer colonies. She spent her days watching the borders of human space, ready to defend her people if the need arose. But increasingly, that need seemed less likely. The alien species that had once dismissed humanity as weak or foolish now sought their advice on conflict resolution. Human negotiators developed a reputation for finding solutions that prevented bloodshed. When disputes arose between member species, it became common to request human mediation. The same psychological understanding that had made humans so effective at war also made them effective at preventing it. On New Boston, Governor Samuel Price watched his colony return to normal life. The defensive systems had powered down, returning to their disguise as mining stations and research facilities. The planetary shield had deactivated, allowing ships to come and go freely. Children played in parks beneath an open sky, never knowing how close they had come to war. And across the galaxy, a new understanding took hold. There were species who fought because they knew no better, species who fought because they wanted to, and species who fought only when all other options had failed. Humanity belonged to the last category, and that made them the most dangerous of all. Because when humans finally went to war, they did not fight for territory or resources or honor. They fought for survival. They fought with every weapon they possessed, every tactic they had developed, every ounce of creativity and determination that had carried them from caves to starships. They did not stop until the threat was eliminated. They never stopped.